Hi guys, and welcome to the third Growth Project live stream here from Leaf Allotment. And today's topic is wildlife conservation. And I'm sure these are words that we've all heard before, and we've read articles and we've seen news clips. The conservation we're looking at today is vitally important, but one that goes unnoticed generally because it's a smaller kind of animal. And we're looking at insects. So this area here has been planted with pollinators in mind and other insects. Most insects live on a plant-based diet, either eating leaves or seeds and roots of plants, as well as the nectar and pollen, which obviously benefits us because they're pollinating our plants. So they're vitally important for not just us, but the whole ecosystem on our lovely planet. So today we're going to look at how we can support insects. One of the obvious ones is growing more flowers. That's definitely a real positive thing that we can do for insects. Another problem that insects are suffering from is the impact on their environment, as well as the use of chemicals and pesticides and general pollution, as well as environmental impacts. So we're going to look at what we can do. We can all do a little thing, and those little things all add up to create a healthy environment for the insect world. So I'm going to show you one plant in particular that's really good for insects, and this will give you a general idea of what sort of things you can plant. Okay, so the impact on their environment is one thing that we can look at. We've got the luxury down here at Leaf Allotment of having 2 acres to use, but you don't have to have a huge amount of space to create wildlife habitats. In fact, you can just use a little corner outside and you can create a habitat for wildlife. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. So let's go down to the polytunnel. This way.
And just as we're going down there, if anybody's got any questions as we go through the session, please do feel free to type in the box below, and Miles will do his best to answer as we go. Get some really tricky ones.
Right, as I said, insects are vital for the ecosystem. They are the basis of the food chain, and they support birds and mammals. So if we support insects, we're playing a vital role in that whole ecosystem. But obviously birds will need feeding as well, because the insect population is in decline. So we're going to look at how we can feed birds and how we can support them to start off with. And it's always recommended to use bird food as opposed to scraps and bits and bobs that you might find, especially bread, particularly isn't very good for birds. So you need to get yourself a good bird seed. There's loads of different things on the market, relatively inexpensive. Obviously you can spend a bit of money on a bird feeder. These ones are quite useful. They have this outer cage, and that will prevent larger birds and squirrels from eating all the food before the smaller birds that can actually get in between these gaps here, and they can get the food. So that's quite a good way of feeding birds. Now you can make your own bird feeder, and here's one I threw together. And there's lots of different systems out there you'll be able to research and find. But this is basically a tin that's had the lid cut in half and the bottom taken off the tin, and the lid put back and just covered in tape. And you just simply fill this with birdseed, like so, and the birds can then sit and feed on the edge there. There isn't any protection from squirrels or larger birds, so you might want to keep an eye on that and position it where the smaller birds can get in there. and you'll need some way of anchoring that onto a tree. You could put a nail in, or onto a post or a fence or something. You could put that up against a fence. We're going to put this down in the orchard later.
What's that made of, Miles?
It's made out of an old tin. It had a lid on, and the lid's been cut in half and stuck on either side, like so. And it's just been taped with duct tape around there. But you could decorate that in a much nicer way. Okay, so that's your bird feeder. That's a very inexpensive way of feeding the bird.
Great.
Then, if you feel confident and you have some kind of woodworking skills and access to wood, you could even build your own bird box. And this is something that we do down at New Leaf Allotment. We build a lot of bird boxes. Now, this is for the smaller birds. Blue tits and great tits and finches will use this because it has a smaller entrance. Up to 32 mil is the recommended size to attract these sort of birds. But another bird box, which is a lot easier, which doesn't require drilling, is an open bird box like this. And this will attract blackbirds and robins and wrens. It's a lot easier to make. It's a very simple construction for that one there. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Birds aren't going to turn their nose up at an imperfect bird box. What is important is that it's positioned in the right way. So you don't want the prevailing wind blowing into the bird box. We have a southwesterly wind here which blows in this direction, so you wouldn't want to face the bird box directly into the wind. It would be quite uncomfortable for the bird. Turn it around this way. Less wind, less rain, better environment. It doesn't have to be airtight. You need airflow. You don't want it to be too hot. Birds do regulate the temperature of their nests, and if it's too hot, it's not ideal. Once you've got your bird box and you've popped that into a tree, what you can do is encourage birds to use that bird box by putting nesting material around the tree. So wherever this is going to be positioned, I'll position this nearby. The birds will come along, hopefully, and they'll say, right, that's a nice looking potential nesting site, and there's nesting material, and that might encourage them to use that. Now, this is an actual bird's nest, which I found on the ground, and it's really interesting to see what the bird has been using. I think some of these feathers may have been its own, but some of them I think they've found, and they've woven them into the nest. There's also a lot of moss. So what I'm gathering from this, the information is that moss is a good thing to use. There's grass, there's leaves. There's also some man-made fibre in here. There's some sort of stuffing material. Could have been from some furniture or something. So the bird's using all sorts of materials there to make that nest. So what I've done also is collected some stuff that the bird can use and put in this one. So we've got some grass, we've got some string, some leaves. So I'm going to leave that in there, and then when we go to put our bird box up, we'll position these nearby, and hopefully that will encourage the birds. And then we'll also put a bird feeder nearby as well. So we're providing a little habitat there to support the birds. So if we just rewind back to the insects that we were talking about earlier, we have in the UK 270 species of wild bee, and they're the unsung heroes of pollination. On one of the previous blogs I showed you how to make a bee home, and it was again a very simple construction. And what some of these bees like to do, they like to nest in tubes, and the parent bee will crawl into a tube and make a little pile of pollen in there, and again through that process they're pollinating our plants. They lay an egg on that pollen, and then they'll seal up the end of the tube and leave the grub to grow up and eat the pollen and then fledge.
Miles, Sophia and Josh both say hello, and they've both asked, are there any opportunities available to come and volunteer at the allotment?
There are, yes, there really are lots of volunteering opportunities, but not until we have some new guidelines from the government as to how many people we can have down here. So as soon as we know, we will put that information on our site and you'll be able to access that. And yes, we've got lots of spaces for volunteering.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon.
If you ask to speak to a member of the Ignite team, phone in BCHA's head office 01202 410 500. We can have a chat with you about that.
So what I'm using here is bamboo. That's a great little tube, a naturally formed tube that you can use. The rule is not to have anything over 10 mil in diameter, because what that can do is attract some parasitical predatory animals that will use that same pile of pollen that the bee has laid its egg on and lay their own egg on there, and their grub will then eat the bee's grub. So it's always good to have less than a 10 mil entrance on there. So it's basically a matter of finding your tubes and popping them into something that can hold them. You can be creative. Here's one that was made by a volunteer a while ago, and this is a long thin sort of container as opposed to a box, and again you want to fill that up with the tubes. Bees are very susceptible, as most insects are, to chemicals, so you really want to use untreated wood, and pallet wood is ideal for that. Pallet wood, as you know, comes in all shapes and sizes, and it's generally free if you can find someone who's got pallets. They used to be treated with chemicals. They're not anymore. They're kiln dried, which kills off any bugs that are in there, but they're chemical free, so it's ideal for building both bird boxes and bee homes. But bees in particular are very susceptible to chemicals. So if you ever bought a bee home and it's beautifully painted, and then you've wondered why there's no bees living in there, that could be the problem, because they are so susceptible to paint. So you want a paint-free bee home. If you are using a saw to cut down your bamboo, there might be a residue of paint. We've used hacksaws in the past and they leave a bit of paint on the ends, and you want to clean that paint off because the bees won't like that either. What I'm using here is offcuts from a windbreak, which again is very similar to bamboo. It's a bit easier to use. You can just cut it down very simply with scissors, and you can find this stuff all over the place. It doesn't last very long, so people do discard it. We're big on recycling down at New Leaf Allotment, so we like to pick up pieces from all over the place and recycle. So what I'm trying to do here is stuff as many tubes in, and what that will do is hold it all in place like that, and you just keep going. Now this was made by one of our learners on a previous growth project session on wildlife conservation, and we all have a go at building a bee home, and most people take them home with them, but this one was left for us, so it's I'm sure they'll be really happy to see it used. So I'm stuffing in the tubes for our wild bees to go into. Now when you position this, it doesn't want to be any more than a metre above the ground. The bees don't like to fly too high because they get bothered by the wind. They stay at a lower level. It wants to be in a warm position, direct sunlight preferably, but otherwise just not in the shade. They do like to be warm. So this is one way of supporting wild bees. If you can't make a bee home and you can't find bamboo or these other reeds here, what you can do is find dried stems. So some of these are stems from nettles, some from flowers that we have growing out on our insect friendly plot. And all you need to do is gather up a bundle. What I'm going to do is just cut that down. You see they're hollow. There's a few hollows there. There's enough hollow apertures there. And if I cut that in half, and rebundle. And
Josh has asked that he's done a level 1 course down here a few years ago,
yeah,
and he's wondering if there's any more courses he can do once everything is resumed.
we have, hi Josh, how you doing? We do have the growth project, but we don't have any more horticultural courses. We just do the level 1 at the moment, but we are looking at maybe in the not too distant future putting together a level 2 course. But in the meantime, Josh, you can always come down and practice your horticultural skills down here at New Leaf Allotment. We certainly do need a lot of help. After this lockdown, the allotment has got a little bit overgrown, and it'd be great to see some of your guys back and helping us out down here.
So the sessions that Miles is going to be delivering over the next 6 weeks are the sessions that are on the growth project. But once we're able to resume sessions back down at the allotment, we'll be doing these face to face, so you're more than welcome when we start that again to come and join the next face to face growth project course. Yeah, Josh is very keen to make something that he can take home and use in his garden.
Oh, absolutely, Josh. Well, we have lots of materials here, and we have a workshop, so come on down and get involved. That'd be great to see you again. So what I've done here, I've bundled up some of these hollow twigs. So you've got the hollow twigs, so this could attract pollinators into there, but you've also got gaps in between these twigs, these stems, and insects will crawl into there. Ladybirds and all sorts of insects will crawl into there. In the winter they will hibernate in there, otherwise they will just stay in there, use it as protection and cover from predators. So you don't want to tie it too tight, but just tight enough to hold it together. And then you will position that on the ground somewhere. And this is something that we do around our plot, and it provides a habitat for beneficial insects. All insects, as we were saying earlier, are endangered. So even those insects that aren't so good, such as aphids, that can damage your crops, there is a place for them. So we do not use any chemicals here at New Leaf Allotment, and we try and find a balance with nature here and let the predatory insects manage the aphids and the problematic insects. I mean, we used to regard them as pests, but now, because the environment is under such threat, we don't see insects as pests now. They have as much right to live here as we do, so we just have to manage them. To get rid of our pests, to manage our slugs, we provide humane slug traps. So basically we put food down for them. We have our compost heap as well, and it just draws them away from the stuff that we're growing. But there's always a bit of damage from slugs, so you just have to plant extra to accommodate for the hungry slugs, and they'll never eat all of your crops unless you get an infestation, which is highly unlikely. So
Sophia would like to make some bird boxes and bee homes as well.
yes, brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Well, if you don't have any practical skills, we can show you how it's done, and we've got all the tools, Sophia, and all the materials, so you can come on down and have a go. And they do look quite nice. They're a great thing to have in the garden, and to know that you're supporting wildlife is fantastic. And as I said earlier, if we all just did a little bit, that adds up to quite a lot, and they have shown that the urban bee is doing rather well in comparison to the bee that lives, let's say, in the natural world, because there's less chemicals being used in our gardens than there is in the farmland, which is one of the factors that's affecting the insect population in the UK. And they say that the insect population has depleted by 40%, some articles have said, which is dramatic. And as I said earlier, you know, these insects are the basis of the food chain. So if you can support insects, you are supporting the entire food chain, which can only be a good thing. So what I'm doing now, I'm just pushing some twigs into the gaps just to create a bit of pressure in there, just to hold everything together. So I'm going to position this in as much sunlight as I can, and about a metre off the ground, about waist height off the ground. No higher than that. Bees don't, the wild bees don't like to fly too high. Some of these wild bees are incredibly small, and they're quite happy to crawl into some of these really small apertures there. Okay, I think that's in there now. I don't think that's going to move. One more just to make sure.
Miles, are wild bees dangerous in any way?
No, they're not. I think some of them do sting, but generally they don't. And they're so small, some of them, that you wouldn't even know they were there. They are the unsung heroes of pollination, especially when it comes to fruit. They pollinate a lot of our fruit. And as I said earlier, they're really susceptible to chemicals, pesticides and paints and whatnot. So it's really important to have a chemical-free, paint-free bee home. So you could probably do a better job than that when you come around and build a bee home. And like I say, it doesn't have to be a square one, it could be an oblong like this. So that's bees. As I said earlier, most insects eat a plant-based diet. Some are predatory insects and they eat other insects, and some are parasitical and they eat blood and flesh, such as ticks and fleas. But we don't have to worry about those. We're not going to provide a home for those, or maybe we are providing a home for those, but we're not sure about it. So there's these methods here for our insects. Now another one that I've just recently learnt about is the butterfly feeding station, and this is a very simple method. There are more elaborate methods out there, but basically you draw a flower, and then in the middle of the flower you stick a bottle top, and I've just used electrical tape to do that, and in the middle of that bottle top is some cotton wool, and in that cotton wool you put sugar water mixed 1 part sugar to 10 parts water, and you soak the cotton wool in the middle of the flower. Now this flower is made out of paper. I've just drawn it on there, and obviously it probably won't keep outside in the rain, so you'd probably want to bring it in if the weather's not looking too good, but otherwise you just leave it outside. What it does need is a stem. And I did have one earlier, there we go. So I'm going to use a bit of bamboo. You could use any stick for this, or you could possibly hang that piece of string from a fence or a tree, or your back door, or your balcony. And the colour of the flower will attract the butterflies, and they will come and feed off the sugar water. Now, one of the other things that is affecting insects, we were talking about earlier, we are aware that pesticides, insecticides in particular, are affecting them. Also impact on their environment, but also there's other things that have a factor, and the weather is one as well. So when you have a long hot dry spell, you will notice insects coming to drink wherever they can. So down by our tap, you can be washing your hands on a hot sunny day, and before long there's insects, there's bees, there's all sorts of creatures coming to drink on the droplets of water that have splashed around. So it's vitally important to provide water for not just insects but birds as well. There we go. So I'm going to put that in the ground for our butterflies. So for insects to drink water, they need to be able to sit on the surface of the water, and I'm using a seed tray here. You could use an old plate or a frisbee or anything that's relatively shallow, and I'm putting in some broken pots. You could use an upturned saucer like this. I'm going to put in some rocks. I'm not going to put the water in yet because I'm going to wait until we've positioned it, and then I'm going to put some water in there. And what these are going to do is provide a surface, so when we've got some water in there, the insects can land on the surface and then they can drink, and they get thirsty the same as we do. So it's vitally important on those long dry spells that we have to provide some water. So I'm just going to fill it up with water a little bit later, and that's going to provide a drinking station for insects and bees and all sorts of things. And I'll probably put our butterfly feeder next to it as well. Hopefully that will last on there. I might put another bit of tape on there. So
Julie says hello to everybody.
Hello Julie. So we've got food for the butterflies, we've got water for the insects, we've got a habitat for wild bees to live in and other insects to live in here. As I said earlier, most insects live on a plant-based diet, but some also eat rotten wood, which is vitally important for insects, rotten wood. And you don't need a lot of it. You can just find a little piece of wood, as long as it's not been painted or treated with anything, and find a corner to put it in your garden or an outside space, and it will slowly decompose, and that provides food for the decomposters, so beetles and worms and bacteria and algae. But it will also provide a habitat for beetles that lay grubs, eggs into the wood that turn into grubs, such as stag beetles. So rotten wood's vitally important. So we've got a whole bundle of things here, and I think it's probably a good idea to go and position these now, and we'll go down to the orchard and we'll find a spot to position our wildlife habitat. So what do I need? I need a wheelbarrow. Put these in here. So I'll leave that one there. Take that. We'll take this bird box. That. Right. Oh, and the bird feeder. Okay, I'm ready.
Right, let's go down to the orchard. If anyone would like any more information about any of the courses that we run down at the New Leaf Allotment, just leave a little message and I'll follow that up, and we'll get all the information to you. Down into this beautiful orchard. What a fantastic place for a picnic. Crucial.
Right. Let's go over here.
How old is this orchard, do you think, Miles?
Pardon?
How old do you think this orchard is?
It's got to be 80 plus years.
It does look very old and ancient.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I think what we can do, we can use this tree. Most of our trees in the orchard do have bird boxes. And we do number them. So then we can keep a record of what's happening and if birds are nesting in there. We do have woodpeckers down here, and the woodpeckers do have a habit of opening up the entrance on a bird box. And then there's also problems with rodents. They do the same to try and find the eggs in there. So before you put a bird box up, it might be worth just checking to see if you have got a rodent problem, or squirrels. They can be a problem as well. But then, having said that, we've got to try and do whatever we can, and sometimes it's best to let nature take its course. But we do have quite a good success rate with our bird boxes down here. So we have a prevailing wind which is southwesterly. So this would be a bit more sheltered from the wind in this position here.
I will do my very best not to fall over Sophia.
Now that is at an angle. But when you do find birds' nests, they will build their nests in the most amazing places, and they will find little nooks and crannies. It doesn't have to be level, as long as you've got a good entrance. So blackbirds, robins and wrens.
Would you only get one bird at a time using that as a nest, or could more go into it at the same time?
You would only have one brood in there,
right?
With two parent birds, but a wren could have several nests. A male wren could be providing several nests around here, and they don't generally come back to the same nest. So you'd find another bird coming in here. So a blackbird could have 3 or 4 broods in a year, but they won't use the same nest, probably because they find a different mate and they move around in different areas. But another bird would come along and use that, and use the materials in there. So these are our materials. So what I'm going to do here is just pop this here. Now I'm banging nails into a tree, which won't harm the tree. Trees are really resilient, and a few nails aren't going to do any harm whatsoever. So there's nesting material, there's a bird box.
What's the ideal things for materials for building nests? What do birds like?
Well, in this one, there's a lot of moss. There's feathers. There's also some fibrous material as well. It's mainly organic, but you do find string, you do find bits of plastic. This one has got stuffing from, which looks like man-made fibre, which could be from anything. Could be from furniture or a soft toy, cushions or something. They've found that from somewhere. It's also got feathers in there. So there's nesting material, there's the nest. So that's the birds taken care of. Now we've got the wild bees. So the sun does come across the sky here in this direction, and they do like the warmth. So I'm gonna, and as I said, about 1 metre high, no more than 1 metre high. So I'm going to position this bee home here, like that, and we'll come back later to see if anything is taking advantage of that nesting area. So this is our insect bath, but obviously, well, insect watering hole, but birds might use it for bathing in as well, and drinking as well. So I'm going to put this down here too. And I'll check on this to make sure it doesn't dry out. Okay, that's great. Then we've got our bird feeder. So the birds are doing okay here. They've got a box and they've got a nesting material, and there's food for them. So put that there.
So the birds and the bees and the different animals are all happy to be in the same location together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's no conflict there.
Yeah, so I mean, birds will feed off the insects, so we are sort of creating this natural environment for them. This is again an insect home. I'm just going to leave this on the floor. I'm just going to shove it next to the tree there, down there, out the way. Quite a habitat. Obviously, you look around, we've got a huge habitat here for wildlife, but what I'm demonstrating here is what you can do at home in just a small space. This could be a fence, this could be a fence post and not a tree, and you could fix these to the fence post. You could have this up against the fence, and the drink up against the fence. Don't forget the butterfly feeder as well, so that could be up against the fence. Put that on the ground. So, yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, rotten wood is absolutely vital for many species of insect. So all I'm going to do is just place that. I'm going to put that there because it creates almost like a little tunnel in there. Something might go into there. You might attract a frog or something. That will go into there.
What time of the year do you have frogs, Miles?
Right now, actually, they're starting to come out of the ponds. They've gone through their whole process from tadpoles, frog spawn to tadpoles, and now they're emerging from the water, and they like to find cool places to hide. They'll crawl under rocks, under sheds. They don't live in ponds, they will live in the cool environment, and they will eat insects. So by providing a habitat like this for insects, like I said, we're establishing or supporting the whole ecosystem. So there we go. There's our little wildlife habitat, something that we can do from home. You've got your wild bees, you've got a butterfly feeding station, and you've got your rotten wood again for insects, water for insects, another habitat for insects to live in, and then we've also provided one for the birds as well. So there we go. You can probably see on this tree there's already some holes. There could be bees in here already living in this area, and if you ever take the time to watch any natural wood, if it's a tree or a fence that's been weathered, you will see insects eating the wood, or wasps collecting wood to build their nests. And if you do, then enjoy that, because it's a marvellous spectacle to see. And it's something that we take for granted, insects, because they're so small and they sometimes bother us when they're buzzing around us, but they're vitally important to our ecosystem and to life on Earth. So that's it for today. That's our wildlife conservation. Now the growth project, we on our session, when you're actually here, we take a walk down to the river from the back of the orchard, and we go to the Kingfisher Farm, which is the starting point of the Star Valley Nature Reserve, and we take a walk on the river, and we see if we can spot any otters, and we enjoy the wildlife that lives in our local area, and it's a beautiful spot. So that's something that we do when we're down here on the course. So that's all from me today. Don't forget to tune in next Thursday when Stuart will be delivering a session on art and relaxation.
Thank you everyone, bye.